As I look at these NBA Finals rosters, it really kind of emphasizes to something to me that I already believe. The Grizzlies really aren't that far off. Like if you look at these rosters, the Grizzlies are not far off from the Mavs or the Boston Celtics. But we'll get to that. And we got to talk about a former Grizzly who was traded in February who's going to be participating in the NBA Finals. And I got one more declaration I want to make for the Grizzlies offseason. Let's talk about it coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer at the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you guys for tuning in with me again on today. Joe Monak's getting the day off for today's episode, but we got a lot to talk about and a lot to cover. As I said in the opening, we're going to kind of put a Grizzlies touch on the NBA Finals because I think there's some good things. As I kind of did the breaking down what I wanted to talk about in today's show. I saw some good things that kind of correlate with what the Grizzlies got going on and what these two teams have going on. They kind of lead me to believe Memphis is close, but we'll talk about that coming up, as well as another former Grizzly. We talked about Mike Conley earlier in the playoffs. Now we got to show X some love. We'll talk about him. And I have scanning the coaching market as our third segment. I'm going to dive deeper into what I mean there as we get closer to the show, because I want to make one more declaration with this Grizzlies offseason before things really get going. But today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA in all caps, Locked On NBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, now let's get into it. Let's get into it because the NBA Finals start today. And, as Joe Monak said in a recent episode, usually the NBA Finals are pretty big in Memphis, no matter who. Memphis, as we know, is a basketball city. And I'm going to put a little local angle on this because as I was looking at those two rosters, some real realizations came to me that I feel like from a Grizzlies standpoint, they're close. And what I mean by close, say, talent-wise, they're not too far off from these teams. There's just some little X and O's kinks, maybe some little shifts in player personnel tendencies and things like that. And Memphis could be right there in this position maybe next year, maybe the year after that, or whenever, the chips fall their way. But the first thing that stood out to me is I want to talk about this is something that, if you've been a long-time listener of Locked On Grizzlies, you've heard me talk about this before, and I say it a lot, and that's name does not come before game. Game over name. Some of you may say, well, Mike, what do you mean by that? Basically, I prefer a guy's game, how he plays, over the big name players and things like that. Like we've talked about this, addressing the center position for the Grizzlies and whatnot, and I've thrown out some lesser known players from a name perspective who I think their games fit exactly what Memphis could acquire. Like, for example, at center, I was mentioning guys like Goga Patatse, and most people would say, oh, Damichael Goga Patatse? Like what? But I'll tell those same people, well, guess what? Derek White was good in San Antonio, so good that he actually played on the USA basketball team. But Derek White was never this good in San Antonio. PJ Washington was solid in Charlotte. He has a very definitive role with the Mavs. Now, Derrick Jones Jr. has been in the league for a little while now. Remember, former Slam Dunk Contest champion. He played on a couple terrible Phoenix Suns teams and still wasn't really that big a part of the rotation. Like, game matters. Derrick Jones Jr. is in a situation now where he can get out in transition when the Mavs are terrific in transition. Now, he gets out in transition, catch some alley-oops. He's a terrific cutter. Luka finds him for a lot of lobs, knocks down corner three-pointers, boom, easy. PJ Washington, play defense, knock down some corner threes, make some hustle plays. Now he looks, as a much better player than, when he had a different role in Charlotte. Derek White, increase your three-point shooting volume. Continue to play high-level defense. The Celtics do a lot of that 1-5 pick and roll, him, Porzingis, and you got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum playing off of you. It's maximized his game, allowing him to get downhill, get to that right hand, use that floater or shoot that three-pointer. He's become a better spot-up three-point shooter because that is a tendency change in his game. So the point that I'm making here is as we get to this offseason, from the Grizzlies standpoint, there may be some moves maybe, and from a name perspective, you may say, I don't know. I don't really know if I like that guy because the Grizzlies don't have a lot of money to work with here. Like if they acquire the big name that many people, are fascinated with, that many people want, the Jared Allens, the Clint Capellas, the Mitchell Robinsons, as we talked about, of the world, that's going to be done via trade. That's the only way they can do it. They can't go out in free agency and just say, here's a bunch of money, take it. They don't have it anymore. That's what happens when you give out these big contracts to John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and that's a good problem. It's not a problem at all because now you're in a situation where you have your core in place, and now you're putting the pieces around them. And speaking of putting the pieces around them, I want to go back to Derrick Jones Jr. a little bit. For the Mavs, solid defender. He's become an improving three-point shooter. He's cutting to the basket. When I think of him in the role that he plays in Dallas, why can't Vince Williams play a similar role in Memphis? And maybe even be better at it. That's what I see. Excluding the fact that both guys are left-handed, but Derrick Jones Jr., he's knocking down the open three-point shots. He's playing terrific defense. He's going to probably get the initial Luka assignment or whatnot, just like we saw during the regular season Vince Williams did, and Vince Williams probably will continue to as he goes along in his career. But Vince Williams can be that type of guy, not even just for that team. He's that defender who understands his role, and what I mean by that is Derrick Jones Jr. is not going to score a lot of points. He'll have some big games. If you remember earlier this season, and I think last season, when Derrick Jones Jr. went off against the Grizzlies, and Desmond Bane, I remember basically said, dude's never made that many three-pointers in his life. It's probably not going to happen again. But as the season went on, and this season went on, you start to learn, Derrick Jones is a confident player. He's taking those shots with confidence. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see Vince Williams Jr. develop to. He's one of the few three-point shooters on this team that's above league average. And I think as he continues to, get molded into that role as a guy that's not going to be asked to do a lot of high-volume stuff, he'll be fine because he understands that. He's okay with not scoring a lot of points, which is something you need in the NBA on your roster. The last point I want to make is when I'm watching the finals, and I suggest you to tune into this too, because this is a big one to me. I'm going to be watching closely how Luka and Kyrie play off of one another. Why? Well, because look at the Grizzlies right now. I think with Desmond Bane and John Morant, the Grizzlies have one of the best backcourts in the NBA. We've been saying that. This is a top 5 backcourt in my mind. I keep using peanut butter and jelly. So if you don't like peanut butter and jelly, this analogy isn't for you. Shout out to all the PB&J fans out there, because that's me. But if you like peanut butter and jelly, that's what I think of when I watch John Morant and Desmond Bane. It's the yin to the yang. You got the downhill, forceful paint scorer, and you got the three-point shooting guy, but they both get out in transition. They both can play in pick and roll, as the initiators and get other guys involved. I think they work well together. But we haven't seen this level of Desmond Bane and John Morant in the playoffs. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing. We saw Desmond Bane last year dealing with the foot injury. The year before that, dealing with the back injury in the second round. John Morant, dealing with the wrist injury after the hard fall. I want to see Desmond Bane and John Morant at a high level playing against elite defenses like this one. The Boston Celtics defense is going to make Luka and Kyrie work, because we've seen Luka and Kyrie play together a lot so far. But the point I'm making here is when you get to the finals, you're going to see Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and Drew Holiday. Zero defensive weaknesses from a skill standpoint. Now, of course, there's going to be some size stuff, like Luka's bigger than certain guys, like Dez would be in certain cases, and Ja would be quicker than certain guys that would defend him, and he jumps higher than all of them. So with all that being said, I want to see how those matchups kind of play out. I want to see, how much will Luka defer to defer to Kyrie when he doesn't have it going? How much will Kyrie defer to Luka when he doesn't have it going? How will they play on the ball, off the ball? How much will Kyrie have the ball in his hands on the ball? Same thing with Luka. How will one's game change when the other one goes to the bench? How will this game adjust back when he comes back into the game? Who has the hot hand? How do they play off each other? All of that, I think, can tie in to the situation we have in Memphis right now. I think it's a terrific backcourt. It's one of the best. And I think to maximize this Grizzlies window, Ja Morant and Desmond Bane already played terrific together in the regular season. It looks really good. But we need to see in the postseason, especially now as Desmond Bane has gotten more into his initiator bag. And I want to emphasize in that 9-game sample size where Ja Morant played, Desmond Bane's assists went up from his regular season average when, we saw him playing more point Bane and all that while Ja was out. Bane's assists were higher when he played with Ja Morant. So that goes to show Ja's willing to defer, but Bane's getting a lot of minutes, as the backup kind of point guard when Ja's out of the game, all of that. The point I'm making here is as we watch this NBA Finals, kind of look at that. Kind of look at how those two, and I use their example more so than Boston because Boston has a bunch of guys who are going to be initiators, whereas in Memphis, it's going to be a lot of Ja and Dez, and you're going to see Vince playing off of them. You're going to see Jaren playing off of them. You're going to see Luke Kennard and other guys, if he's back or whatever, playing off of them. So that's the point that I'm making there. But there's a former Grizzlies player who's going to be playing in the NBA Finals as well. We talked about Mike Conley. I want to talk about another guy who you may be willing to root for in the NBA Finals coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, this show is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Gametime makes NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. So if you're looking for some prices on the Gametime app, they usually go down closer to the tip-off. So keep that in mind. So with some killer last-minute deals, if you want to go out there to Boston, if you want to go out to Dallas, if you're in Memphis, Dallas just a little 6-hour drive, quick little flight. Get some all-in prices, views from your seat, and you can get the lowest price guaranteed on Gametime because Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can get the last-minute tickets, the flash deals, zones deals, easy to find and buy, and you also get some MLB tickets for every kind of event in your area. Gametime is the lowest price guaranteed. You get event cancellation, job loss protection, and you get views from all seats in the venue to let you know just how far off you are from the action. Just make sure you go take advantage of all these opportunities. If you're wondering what a flash deal is, you can save even more with the exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. If you're wondering what a zone deal is, you save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seat. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets over with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On NBA. That's capital LOCKED, capital ON, and then caps NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about Xavier Tillman Sr. He's playing in the NBA Finals. What does that mean? What does his role look like? Let's talk about that coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. Recapping so far, we're putting a little NBA Finals touch on today's episode. Talked about Ja Morant, and Desmond Bane. Like I want to see Luka and Kyrie, how they play against that fearsome, I think is a good word to put it, Boston defense. I think there are some lessons that'll be learned, whether good or bad, that we could use and apply to Memphis as the Grizzlies go into what should be a much healthier situation next season. But it wasn't a healthy situation this season, and that led to a lot of changes happening. One of those changes was the Grizzlies trading Xavier Tillman Sr., who was on the last year of his deal, to the Boston Celtics. And when he was traded to the Boston Celtics, I think the idea in Boston was they get another versatile defensive big, and one that, quite frankly, I don't think they really had. And that's why I want to talk about the prospects of Xavier Tillman potentially making an impact in the NBA Finals. And you might say, well, why are we talking about Xavier Tillman Sr.? Let's start here. This guy played a long time in Memphis. He was a important role player here, and he's a good locker room guy. Xavier Tillman Sr. was, at least to me, he was one of those guys that always kept it straight to you. He was always willing to talk, even in the worst times. When the Grizzlies were bad at rebounding, he said we suck at rebounding. When things were going good, he knew how to break things down, and just very professional player. One of the most, I guess, enduring guys on the Grizzlies roster from that time period before he was traded. And I saw the effect it had in the locker room. Jaren Jackson Jr. and other guys, it was a tough pill to swallow when Xavier Tillman Sr. Was traded, from the emotional side. The guys get the business side, but that one was a tough one for them to swallow overall. Now, getting into the X and O's of this thing, Xavier Tillman Sr. is playing the lowest minutes of his NBA career in Boston since his second season. As you saw in the last couple of years, his role was in and out with the Grizzlies, but still he was averaging more than 13 minutes per game, which is what he's playing, what he's played pretty much in Boston. How many times did he reach 13 minutes in that last series against the Pacers? Only one. So as the playoffs have kind of unfolded, and the Celtics have kind of, decreased their rotation size, Xavier Tillman Sr. has not been a consistent member of that. But if you look at this series, you're going to see some curveballs thrown. You're going to see teams, they're going to throw the kitchen sink out there, as people like to say. You're going to throw everything out there and say, hey, we gotta throw something at the wall. Let's find out what sticks. And Xavier Tillman Sr. could be one of those things for Boston. Quite frankly, I think he should be. And we'll see. I think you go with your plan A first, right? Kristaps Porzingis is your plan A, and you got Al Horford in there as your big as a good plan B. But if something goes wrong, not from a health standpoint, but from a production standpoint from those guys, I quickly turn to Xavier Tillman Sr. over Luke Cornett. I quickly turn to him. The reason is, if you look at Al Horford, you look at Kristaps Porzingis. Let's break it down real quick. Kristaps Porzingis, one, it doesn't sound like he's 100% healthy. There's some questions. Even talking to people out in Boston, they don't know what to expect from him. But even with all that being said, even a 100% healthy Kristaps Porzingis, he's best in drop coverage. Yeah, you put him on an island against Luka or Kyrie, I don't think that's something Boston is going to try to do. Kristaps Porzingis, even before he got to Boston, I think his last season with the Wizards, he rated as one of the best drop coverage defenders in the NBA, and that's kind of translated, into Boston. So when you think of what makes Kristaps Porzingis best on defense, is putting him in that drop, letting him use that wingspan, 7'3" height to affect things and be a decision maker on the defensive end. Now getting over to Al Horford. I think Al Horford's still solid. He's one of those ageless wonders. Like he's like a good old bottle of wine. Like he looks good. But at the same time, we talk about Draymond Green hating a lot, but Draymond Green actually said something when I think he was talking to Jason Tatum during the Pacers series, and he mentioned the fact that, hey, right now they're going at Al Horford, but how do you plan on adjusting to that when it's Luka and Kyrie going at him? And Jason Taylor, played it to the left, basically saying, hey, we're not counting our chickens before they hatch. We got to address this one thing first. Like, we got to finish this series. But it was a valid question. Al Horford in his later years, especially right now, and, we've seen him do well against the Joel Embiids and things like that, but and Giannis Antetokounmpo's. But you put him in front of Kyrie Irving on switches and Luka Doncic. And these aren't going to be his primary defenders. We just know that Kyrie, over the course of his career, and Luka have done very good jobs at manipulating matchups. They're going to see Al Horford on that floor, and they're going to say, come on, you come, bring him up here, come set a screen. If they switch it, I'm about to take advantage. Luka Doncic is dominating switches so far in the playoffs. We saw it in the game 2 when he hit the shot over Rudy Gobert. We've seen it several other times, in instances during this playoff run So with all that being said, the point that I'm making here is Xavier Tillman Sr., for all the things that he lacks, the offensive, limits there defensively, he's solid screen setter, but not great, not a great rebounder per se, but a good rebounder. For all the things that he's not great at, one of the things that he is great at is his defensive versatility. I remember asking him, I said, what's the strength of your game? He said, my defensive versatility. If you remember in that series against the Lakers, there were instances where the Grizzlies straight up made Xavier Tillman Sr. the primary LeBron James defender. If you can make him the primary LeBron James defender, I think there are going to be moments when you have Derek White out there, Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and you should make Xavier Tillman your 5. Say, hey, if who are you going to attack now? Yeah, you can go at Derek White and Drew Holiday if you're Luka because they're smaller guys, but you'll still have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown coming to help. You'll have Xavier Tillman Sr. if he wants to put Tillman on an island, being able to hold his own. And let me set the record straight here. Luka can cook anybody. Like if Luka's got it going, he's hitting that step back. You can put the best defender of all time out there, and it's still it is what it is. Like Luka just makes tough shots. But it's all about making things difficult for him. And we saw it in Memphis when they played the Mavs. And we've seen it with Xavier Tillman Sr. against other teams, against the LeBron James of the world and whatnot. He's very good at making things difficult for perimeter players. So that's one role where I say, hey, yeah, Xavier Tillman does not have a clear role in this NBA Finals. But I'm looking forward to seeing if Boston at some point, if Dallas is having success killing the drop coverage that Boston's going to like to play, probably with Kristaps Porzingis, if they're switching more without Horford and Luka or Kyrie's having a lot of success, then you go to your third big. And in this series, I think that player should be Xavier Tillman Sr. Coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to scan the coaching market. I think there's one more declaration I want to make this offseason for the Grizzlies. But before I do that, I'm not going to do that by doing a lot of screaming and hooping and hollering and all that, because if you want to hear all that stuff, Fox Sports or ESPN is where they do that. Here on Locked On Grizzlies, make the switch to Locked On Sports today if you don't want to hear all the hooping and hollering and shouting, because it's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that. Locked On Sports brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team each and every single day. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Look, man, PrizePicks is the place to go right now during the NBA Finals. That's where you need to go, because PrizePicks is America's number one fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It is the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action, without a doubt, where you can watch your favorite sports players and your favorite teams. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100,000 times your cash. I mean, 100 times, not 100,000. That's a lot. 100 times your cash. How do you do that? Well, guess what? With PrizePicks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. All you got to do is make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projection, and pretty much you're locked in after that. And remember, PrizePicks is America's number one fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, so you can get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. It's really much that simple. All you got to do now is go over to the PrizePicks app, download it right now, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, download the app today, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. It's simply that easy. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, let's scan the coaching market a little bit. I think the Grizzlies should make a couple changes. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thanking you guys for tuning in with us on today. Now, as we talk through today's show, we talked about a bunch of different things, right? We talked about the NBA Finals, pretty much in particular. But we've talked about Xavier Tillman's role. We talked about the Kyrie and Luka Doncic backcourt tandem. There's some things that I think I want to see from them that we could probably apply to what John Morant and Desmond Bane are doing over here in Memphis. But lastly, I want to switch the tone a little bit because I want to talk about what this is based off what's going on in the NBA right now. A lot of coaching changes. We're seeing that Dan Hurley has pretty much come out of left field now. He's getting some buzz as a potential Lakers head coach after we've been hearing, JJ Redick, as a guy who was the primary option for that job and whatnot. So now it got me thinking. And one thing that stood out to me when you look at the situation of the Grizzlies from the coaching standpoint, they lack a certain type of assistant coach. And I think they should go get it. As you've seen, me and Joe, we talked about player needs going into the offseason. A lot of our player needs conversation has been centered around archetypes, certain types of players, running lob threats, low usage type of centers, not high volume guys, back to the basket players, things like that. We've basically been talking about those archetypes more so than just throwing names out there. That's kind of what I'm going to do with this. And then I'm going to throw a couple names just to make the point make more sense. But I think, why shouldn't the Grizzlies go out and get a more experienced assistant coach that has a former head coaching ability? There are a couple guys that stand out to me, guys who are former head coaches. If you look at the Grizzlies staff, pretty much under Taylor Jenkins, none of them are former NBA head coaches. And that's fine, because as we've seen, Taylor Jenkins in his time with the Grizzlies, it's all about development. And we'll talk about that a little more in a second, but development is the key. And a lot of these Grizzlies assistants, again, Anthony Carter gets a lot of credit for development on his team. Darko Rakovic, when he was here, he got a lot of, credit for helping Desmond Bane get to the next level, for really working with guys like Zaire, Scooney Penn, working with John Morant and Tyus Jones, even in the front court, all the way down the line. Like, development is the name of the game for the Grizzlies. And with that being said, I think right now, with all the coaching turnover that's going on in the NBA and the names that are available, and we're seeing, Taylor Jenkins basically say he's going with the front office a couple weeks ago when we talked to him. They're going through the idea of some changes. A couple names come to mind. The first name is a layup, and that's Darvin Ham. If you're unfamiliar, Taylor Jenkins and Darvin Ham worked together for 5 years with the Atlanta Hawks. Then they worked together in Milwaukee before Taylor got his job with the Grizzlies. They have a big brother, little brother relationship. They're very close still to this day. When the Lakers played the Grizzlies, and I wrote about it in the Commercial Appeal, just the Darvin Ham, Taylor Jenkins relationship there. And Taylor Jenkins is a relationship guy. Remember Patrick St. Andrews? He's here because that is a previous existing relationship where they both were assistant coaches, with the Bucks, and they both were with the Hawks under Mike Budenholzer. Darvin Ham fits that description. He's already turned down one job reportedly. I think the Suns were rumored to offer him an assistant job, and he turned it down. But Taylor Jenkins has a better relationship with him. And some of you say, man, Damichael, Darvin Ham didn't work out in L.A. And my rebuttal to you is, do you remember why Darvin Ham got the job in L.A. in the first place? It's because of his ability to develop, and particularly forwards. Look at the Grizzlies roster right now. You tell me where there's the biggest bunch position-wise. It's forwards. Now I'm getting back to the developmental conversation because this was a Mike Budenholzer staple. Mike Budenholzer, and I talked to people out in Atlanta about this who were around that team. They said that he liked to give certain coaches certain player groups. This is something that's not just exactly super common in the NBA, but it was Mike Budenholzer's way of kind of like, deploying roles, right? This coach is going to work more with forwards. This coach is going to work more with the guards. This coach works more with the bigs. Taylor Jenkins does the same thing still to this day. as we talked about with Darko Rajakovic working with certain guys. Anthony Carter working with the, Jake LaRavias, the G.G. Jacksons of the world, the Vince Williams, etc. Why can't Darvin Ham come over here and kind of help the development with those forwards as well? I think it makes a lot of sense. But there are a couple other names that I'll just briefly mention here, former head coaches that make sense. One is Terry Stotts. If you remember what happened with Terry Stotts in the news earlier this season, he actually was in Milwaukee at the beginning of the season over there with Adrian Griffin, who had just gotten the head coaching job. And the idea I thought there was, Adrian Griffin, new guy getting a head coaching job, got him, Giannis liked him, whatnot. Bringing in Terry Stotts gives him a guy who had some experience, who also had a previous existing relationship with Damian Lillard. But it didn't work out. Terry Stotts left, I think, early in the season, before the season, and now he's free. Why I say Terry Stotts' name is, yes, he's a little bit on the older side, and I'm not sure how he would fit in that player development role or whatever the case may be. But offensively, Terry Stotts has put together some great offenses. You want to talk about a guy who's going to emphasize, getting some three-point shots ups, who's going to bring a little bit more creativity, who's had some playoff success. He led Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum, had a Portland team that made the Western Conference Finals. Didn't win a game off that Warriors team, but they made the Western Conference Finals. Terry Stotts makes sense for me from that perspective. If you want a guy who can bring in some offensive, innovative ways, he makes a lot of sense to me. Another guy I'm going to briefly throw out there, just for a namesake, Scott Brooks. That's another guy who's been a terrific, offensive coach, with the Thunder, with the Wizards, and whatnot. But that's a different one because he's already an assistant coach. You'd have to poach him from somewhere, whereas Darvin Ham and Terry Stotts are relatively free at the moment. But the point I'm making is, if the Grizzlies want to go get that type of coach, a guy who's a former head coach, put him alongside of Taylor Jenkins and say, hey, Taylor, when I was in the playoffs and I was in this sitting situation, this is what I did. Those are three guys that come to mind. Darvin Ham, more from a developmental standpoint. Terry Stotts has been there in the playoffs. Scott Brooks has as well. But that's something I want to monitor the rest of this offseason as we get to the coaching conversation. There are some former head coaches that are available that probably would take some jobs on that Grizzlies bench because Darko Rajakovic turned it into a head coaching job. Why couldn't they if that is the goal of going forward? But thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies on today. Make sure you remember that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on the Amazon Fire TV as well in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. On tomorrow's episode, you're going to be with Joe Mullinax. He's going to break everything down, all Grizzlies. I'm going to get a good day off. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And remember that Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. Until next time, I'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies. This is Damichael Cole. See you next time on Locked On Grizzlies.